Yo, what's going on, guys? It's Patrick, back today with another beat breakdown for you. And today's video features a very special guest. No surprise if you read the title of this video. That's right, the very talented Mr. Curt Henderson. Now, I'm sure you've seen Curt over on Instagram, or maybe in the insanely popular video that he did with Fender, or maybe at a gig. In any event, Curt is a super talented guitar player and just an all-around really nice dude. I mean, he's Canadian. Of course he's a nice dude. They're like the nicest people ever. Anyway, Curt and I have been friendly for a couple of years, and he was in town for a gig a few weeks back, and I had to have him over to the studio just for a hang and play some music. And we actually ended up with a pretty dope sounding track. So I'm gonna play the track for you right now, then we'll break it down together. Curt's gonna stop by, talk a little bit about the guitar parts that he played. I've got some cool production stuff to share with you guys. We're gonna talk a little bit about Output Arcade. But first, let's roll the track. Check this out. So a lot of times when you're collaborating with someone, at least in my experience, one of the people involved will have an idea that they want to work on. At least a starting point, something to get the ball rolling, but in this case, we were literally just hanging out. We were talking about music. Curt was over there playing my guitar, and we were just chilling. So just as a way to kind of get some ideas flowing, I opened up Logic and went right to the Arcade plugin by Output. And I've talked a little bit about this plugin on the channel before. I'm sure a lot of you have heard about Arcade, but for those of you who haven't, Arcade is this kind of unique new synthesizer where you can trigger and manipulate different loops and samples within the kit that you're using. So in essence, there's a bunch of different product lines, and the product lines will determine what sonic world you're kind of existing within. So for example, there's a product line called Toys. And within the Toys product line, you get a bunch of kits. All of those kits load up with 15 different loops or samples, and all of those loops and samples within those kits were created using children's toys. Just think of it like product lines kind of defines the genre or the style that you're in, then the kits kind of define the preset that you're working within, and then within the kits you get a bunch of different loops and samples. So one of the lines that I personally really like to use is called Aura. Aura has a lot of nice pad sounds, a lot of nice atmospheric stuff. It's kind of a nice starting off point when you're trying to build out a vibe for a track. So I just went into a random kit. This particular kit is called The Simple Times. And I started just checking out and playing some of the different sounds, and I came to this little sample. So messing around and playing with those different loops, I ended up coming up with this little kind of intro section. And then from there, I immediately started laying down the beat. Started with hi-hats and claps. We've got two clap tracks, one pan to the left, one pan to the right, so we got a nice stereo image for ourselves. And then I added this little conga part. Again, we got two parts, one pan to the left, one pan to the right, so we got kind of a wide stereo image thing going on. And then on the track on the right side, I just added a little bit of delay to it. This is the H delay from Waves. Ultimately, I just dug the way that it sounded only on one of the two drum tracks. But while I was doing all of this, Curt was jamming on the guitar, and he came up with some pretty cool chords, so let's check that out. So let me have Curt tell you a little bit about this guitar part.
Hey guys, I'm going to talk to you about the guitar parts that I put down on my track with Patrick Breen. So let's talk about the first part first. The first part, basically it's just a few chords. We're holding out an A minor 9. That's a voicing I really like to use. You get a little bit of dissonance between the G and the B strings. And then that's going to move into an E minor 9 on the 7th fret. It's got a little hammer-on the B string from 5 to 7. And then that falls down to this chord here. And that chord, there's a few different ways of looking at it. It's an E dominant 7 flat 9 chord. But it has the G sharp in the bass, so you could say it's in first inversion, or you could just say E dominant 7 flat 9 over G sharp. Whatever you want to call it, it's basically, to put it in a different voicing that's maybe a little bit more common, it's that kind of sound, but stacked up a little bit differently. And I like to use that chord a lot as an approach chord. So basically, you put it a fret below on the leading tone to a chord that you want to resolve to. So again, you can hear it create some tension, and then that tension is released when we get to that minor chord. I'm playing 4, and then 3 on the D string, 4 on the G string, and 5 on the B string. And you can also just bar on that 3rd fret and use that as a hammer-on from 3 to 5 on the B string. And those are the chords.
So the last thing that I added to this little intro section was just a simple electric piano part, just playing along with what Curt's already playing. There's a preset in Arturia's Analog Lab that I really like to use called Stage Dark. But if you're just working with Logic stock plugins, you can find something very similar in the Vintage Electric Piano plugin. I like to add a little tape saturation to this sound. I use the J37 plugin from Waves, and I don't even do a whole lot with this plugin. I just tweak the rate and depth on the wow and flutter parameters to give me that nice little vintage warbly sounding tape thing. And the last thing I added was just a little bit of reverb. I like to use the Valhalla Vintage Verb. It is a sick reverb plugin. It's $50. It's really versatile. Definitely check it out if you're looking for like a really lush and nice sounding reverb plugin. But let's move on to the next section where the main feature is this dope Curt Henderson solo. We recorded this guitar part DI. Curt's not playing through an amp or anything like that. And of course, the main feature of this guitar part is that auto wah envelope filter sound that you hear John Mayer use a lot. Tom Misch uses this a lot. You can go out and buy a pedal. I actually have a Qtron, but for this, I just used a Logic stock sound. If you go into the pedal board plugin, there's a pedal called Auto Funk. Put a little bit of compression before it, but here's what the settings look like. If you use this, you will want to play with the sensitivity and cutoff controls just a little bit to dial in the sound a little bit to get the right amount of quack. But it's a really good plugin and I definitely recommend using it. But let me let Curt tell you a little bit about this guitar part.
Okay, so for the second part of the tune, we wanted something that was going to be more melodic. We're in the key of E minor, so this melody is derived from the E minor scale. Tone-wise, we put an envelope filter on it using a plugin. That's going to give us that Tom Misch inspired kind of quackiness, a little bit of funk to it. In the room today, I'm using my DoD envelope filter off my board. That's going to put us in the same sort of ballpark tone-wise. And here's the melody. That's the first half. The second half is largely the same idea. It's got a little bit of a different thing at the end, which I'll get to. The important thing I just wanted to address here, when I'm using an envelope filter, which I like to use a lot, I'm looking more to like focus on the attack of the notes, because that's what opens and closes that filter and gives you the quack. The attack of the notes and how hard I'm picking or how lightly I'm picking is what's going to provide that dynamic interest in your melody. So for the second part of the melody, we're looking at more or less the same thing to start. It goes like this. So you can see it's a little bit different at the end there. The back half of that melody targets the 9, that F sharp in the key of E minor. So you get a little bit of color there, which is nice. But again, it's the same idea. I'm trying to like make it nice and legato. Using lots of hammer-ons, pull-offs, and slides, which with a filter is a really beautiful sound. And that's more or less the idea for the melody.
So the beat in this section is pretty straightforward. I just added kick and snare, and then on the second half of the section, a little hi-hat sample comes in. And that stays the same all the way through to the end of the track. The next section is kind of the little funky jam section, and the only thing that I add in that section is a little tambourine. So as the track progresses, I'm really only adding 1 or 2 drum parts in each section, but this really helps the song to build. So Curt also laid down some electric rhythm guitar in this section. So I took the chords he was playing and I just doubled them on a couple synths, one being a Prophet 5, another being the Diva synth from Yuhi. Sounds like this. So we got that far and we obviously needed a bass part. I was playing around with a couple of bass ideas, but I ended up going back into arcade just to frankly try to get some ideas. I'm a guitar player who can dabble on bass, but I don't think like a bass player. So sometimes it's nice if you don't have a bass player readily available just to get some ideas for yourself. And wouldn't you know, arcade has a line called bass line. So it's filled with kits that all have different bass loops in them. So I ended up finding one called Lovely Curves, and it had like a bunch of really interesting little bass loop parts in it. So I ended up taking a bunch of these loops, recording the MIDI data, and then bouncing that in place so that I had waveforms to work with. And then I took all of those bass parts that I laid down and I ended up chopping them up to form the bass part that you hear when you listen to the track. I had never done anything like this before, but it definitely serves the song really well. It's a rockin' sounding bass part. It's probably better than anything I would have played, to be honest with you. So super happy with how this turned out. And yeah, output arcade for the win once again. I definitely understand people who think that using loops or samples is kind of like cheating in a way. But if you're stuck for ideas and you need a little something for your track, loops and samples can be a really good place to get ideas for your track. So in this section, the beat is kind of building us towards a little bit more of a dance, groovier, funkier section, if that makes sense. So I really didn't want to overcomplicate things too much. I just played some like funky guitar stuff. And I also brought back this sample from the first section. And then the last thing I added was just some lush pad sounds. I've got some chorus on it and then the S1 imager from Waves, just making it super wide in the mix. And this is actually the Pigment synth from Arturia, which I don't own the full plugin, but I get a few presets within Arturia Analog Lab, which is really nice. And this is a preset called Howls, and just as it is, it sounds really nice. And then I found this disco string sample that I just had to have. Listen guys, that's gonna wrap up today's video. I hope you guys are enjoying these little beat breakdowns. Hopefully you're learning something or getting some ideas for your own tracks. But listen, big shout out to my friend Curt Henderson. It was such a pleasure getting to hang with him and jam and come up with a little track. Curt is actually working on getting his own YouTube channel up and running, so be sure to check out the description below for a link to Curt's channel. Definitely subscribe. He's gonna have some great content for you, a lot of great guitar stuff. But listen guys, it's been a pleasure getting to hang out with you today. Until next time, my name's Patrick. I'll catch y'all soon, all right? Peace.